Start recording. So again, like from this, just so you know, we're talking about this being frame by frame animation, right? Just so it's on the video for anybody who may be missing it. So every frame of that is drawn as a new drawing, right? Takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of skill as a draftsman, and it takes something else that may not become very evident, which is every time he draws that character, it has to seem like the same character. It's called staying on model, right? Now, if you've been working mainly in 3D animation, you don't have to worry about that. Somebody gives you a model and you just sort of warp it around, right? You can't really break that character. You can, but like it's sort of set up to where it's always going to look like the same character. But if he draws the next drawing a little off, like the head's a little too big, and then the next drawing it's a little off again, like 2 seconds down the road, she's going to look like a completely different character, right? So that's one of the reasons that this is hard, right? You have to be a really strong illustrator to be able to pull this off for every frame of animation. That's probably why some of you got into this, probably why some of you like this idea, is that you like doing illustration. So this is a little bit more difficult, but kind of has a higher level of craft. Well, I don't want to say craft, but like has a little bit more like people have a tendency to respect that quality because it takes so much work, right? Sometimes you just want to tell a story though, right? Like if you're drawing all of these frames, I'm sure this is Glenn Keane, probably one of the best animators alive. I'm sure this still took him like 4 months, right? If you are wanting to tell a story, sometimes you trim down on the amount of fidelity for those illustrations just to be able to tell more story quicker, right? So for example, a lot of 2D animated series, like I said before, you have to be able to do like 2 minutes of animation, 20 minutes of animation in 2 weeks, right? Now that's not one person, that's a whole team, but that's a lot of animation. Like your turnaround time is probably 2 minutes a person in 2 weeks, right? That's a lot. To do that, you start cutting corners, right? Maybe you say, oh, you know what? That pose is good enough for the next 2 seconds of animation. I'll just animate her ponytail wiggling a little bit, right? That's where we're saying limited animation. You limit it to certain elements. One of the most notable sources of this is He-Man. Did anybody watch the old He-Man comics or cartoons? Have you ever watched any of those? Yeah, let's watch a second or two of it. Of one. Did that not work? What happened?
So I just created this dope website with Wix.
Sure you did.
Let me show you how I did it.
Okay.
First up,
all right. So let's get up here a little bit.
By the power of Grayskull.
So there's some. Really, I cut straight to the. That's awesome. It's like I could sense it.
Over there!
So you'll notice in some of these scenes.
Patrick!
Oh no.
Like someone transported the royal palace out into
I
the
can't
desert.
work YouTube.
I made this paradigm.
So you'll notice in a lot of these, all we're seeing
The Stargate.
is an illustration with like the mouth moving, right? Or the eyes moving. Or maybe one arm will raise. Right? Occasionally there'll be full sections where every one of them is a full drawing. They're like that. Them going by on the conveyor belt. That was just the same drawing and they slid it a little bit, right? Filmation is the ones that made this. Actually, there have been more than one company made Filmation. But they're like really well known for
What's that?
having cranked out some animations very quickly. I think they did like Brave Star and a whole bunch of others back in the 80s and 70s. This isn't the first example of limited animation, but this is the way you can kind of understand what we mean by limited, right? And eventually you're just laying enough elements in to where it feels like it's alive, right? Because what you're trying to do is tell a story. Like the episode list for some of these shows was like 50 episodes. Like it was a ridiculous number. If you look at the old G.I. Joe cartoons, I think the first season was something like 73 episodes or something. It was ridiculous. And so they have to get these out because, frankly, what they're doing is trying to sell toys, not make something that's going to win an Academy Award, right? They're trying to entertain kids. And so limited animation is like, in something like this, it's very easy to spot. And don't get me wrong, I'm not picking on He-Man. This is one of my favorite cartoons of all time. I can just also separate the fact that it was very, very low quality animation at times, right? There's actually, if you ever, me and my wife have the box set to He-Man and She-Ra. And some of the behind the scenes, they have like a commentary for one of them where one of the animation directors said, in this episode, there's this very distinctive laugh that He-Man does. And like, you'll see it all over the internet, people making fun of it. He said, what we tried to do was see how many times we could make him laugh in this episode, how many times we could reuse it. And they got up to like 10. Like, it was crazy. So it's just the same animation over and over again. Now, as technology improved, we realized there was ways of doing this easier, right? Like, this is still on animation celluloid. This is still on plastic that they've drawn and painted on. And what they would do for limited animation here is they would photocopy those inked lines over and over on multiple celluloids, and then just draw the arm in a different place on each of them. So it was one drawing for the entire body, but then the arm was a different drawing for each piece of it. And I actually have some animation drawings downstairs I can show you where, like, frame number 30 is a character's full head, and then 35 or 31 through like 50 is just a whole bunch of different mouths, right? So they photocopy that one head and they just draw different mouths on that same head over and over again. But as technology got better, we found other ways of doing this, right? And so now we're on the computer, and even though it sounds like I've spent the last 5 minutes like degrading limited animation, sometimes that's your goal, is to tell a bigger story, right? And you have to account for the fact that you are one person or you're a small team, but your goal is to still tell a larger story, not to show a really beautifully crafted physical action, right? And when that's the case, Toon Boom is really good for that. So later we're going to be working on those different dances. One of the ones we're going to do is a limited animation dance, and one of the ones we're going to do is a frame-by-frame animation dance. Now, it's not an either-or situation. Every animation is a variety of both techniques, right? It's really a production situation of like how often can you get away with certain tricks versus what level of quality are you aiming for. So a lot of the more recent stuff that you will see, I hate this thing. Can I not hide this? A lot of the more recent stuff you will see in limited animation. Let me see if I can find one for you here. It is... Here we go. So like a really good example of limited animation right now is Archer. I know it's not, I don't even know if they're still making episodes of this. Are they? So I watched one episode and I was like, oh, all right. Like it's a humor for, it's a very crude humor. So like, you know, and yeah, I think it's like, it's intentionally trying to be offensive on times. The cool thing about Archer is like how they actually produce it. And so I have a couple of examples. There is some 3D elements to it, but you actually can see as we get down here, this is how they're breaking up the character, right? Like every Archer scene, he's broken up into all of these different layers, and then essentially they're just rotating those different things or turning layers on and off, right? Like they need a different set of eyes, they turn that eye on, right? And so this is what we're going to be focusing on in week 2, I think it is setting up a rig similar to this, okay? this is not all of what we have to do. This isn't every situation though. When you're using limited animation, there's a lot of tips and tricks that we can do that simplify stuff. So this is really just something I wanted to talk about before we jumped into what we're going to be doing next. So the reason for that is because what I want to do next is to ask you to do frame-by-frame animation. Again, I said at the beginning of last class, sometimes I'm going to ask you to do stuff and you're going to say, why? I think there's this easier way, or hey, I know a better trick for this. I'm asking you to do it this way for a reason. And one is because one of the things that makes people decide they don't want to do 2D animation after all is the fact that you have to redraw drawings over and over and over and over and over again. Sometimes that's not fun. And so I really want you just to practice that. But the other reason we're going to do it this way is because the decisions you're going to have to make are on a frame-by-frame basis, right? And when we use some of those tips and tricks, or some of those tricks that make animation easier, sometimes you forget to look at that on a frame-by-frame basis. So I'm going to show you, just kind of walk you through what I want you to be doing today for the first little while of class. And what I'll do is I'll kick you off on this, and we'll work a little bit together with this, but then we'll just go ahead and hit pause, and then we're going to shift gears to doing some more character design stuff. And then hopefully we'll have a little bit of time at the end of class here where you can just be working on both of those. Okay? So, opening up Toon Boom Harmony. So you may already have yours open. Harmony Premium. And I'm going to go ahead and open up my week 1 folder. Okay. So you've already seen that this is the one where I was playing around with this simple ball animation, right? Well, I'm going to do some more of that. I'm going to create a completely new ball animation. Okay. So feel free to follow along and do your own variation of this. You don't have to copy it exactly. I'm going to extend my timeline out to about 90 frames. For right now, I'm just going to do, no, it's going to do 90. There we go. Okay. I'm going to create a new layer. Nope. Oh, I'm sorry. If you didn't do this already, I'm actually broadcasting through WebEx. So you are, you can go in here to the links and grab this WebEx thing and join the meeting as well if you haven't done that already. I'm going to try to do that every week, so you'll have the option of viewing it on your screen as well. So for this, I'm going to add a new layer, a new drawing layer. I'm going to do vector, vector. And I'm going to call this ball 1. Or, well, I've called that. Let's call this, yeah. Let's call it ball A. There we go. So, I'm actually going to add another layer as well that's a vector. And I'm going to call it ref. So that's for reference. All right, I'll go ahead and close that for right now. Now, in this ref file, all I'm going to do is draw a single thing, okay? I'm going to draw a curve. Right? I'm going to draw the path that I want my ball to take, okay? So this can be whatever you want it to be. I'm going to use my brush. I'm going to maybe have mine start here. I'm going to do something like this, right? So this is just so I can have a reference point. Right? So after I have that, I can actually lock this layer if I want to. I can do whatever. and I can go to ball A, and you'll see that I can still see my reference layer there. I'm just going to use this to to guide myself on where I want this animation to go, right? So on frame 1, right here, I'm going to go ahead and draw the ball at the starting point, right? Something like this. Okay. Now, all the way out here on frame 90, I want to draw it at the end point. Now, if I go out to frame 90, both of them disappear, right? So I'm going to go up to reference. To extend that keyframe all the way out to frame 90, I could use, let's see here. This one, what does that do? That's add key exposure, remove key exposure. I'm pretty sure if I click add key exposure, it'll extend that out to, apparently I'm wrong. Okay, I never use the buttons anyway. The way I usually extend it is I go out to here and I hit F5. And so F5 will extend that all the way out to the end, right? So now no matter where I am, that same drawing is being exposed on every frame for these 90 frames, right? I'm just gonna go all the way to the end, and I'm gonna draw my ball out here. Now, again, if I need to see the size of that ball or whatever, I can extend my my onion skinning all the way out to there, just so I can see. But I'm just gonna go ahead and draw that at the end. It's a little smaller, about like that. So I know that this seems tedious to just redraw this circle over and over again. I'm actually doing it this way on purpose, so I'll get in the habit of drawing it the right size, and eventually this won't be as tedious. So right now, it's right there at the beginning, right there at the end, and if I were to turn off that onion skinning and turn off that layer, I could hit play, and basically it's just going to hold that until the very end where it snaps to it, right? So when we say keyframe animation, I think people overlook what that word means, keyframe, right? Keyframe means we're going to start doing this animation by breaking it down into the most crucial parts and most crucial drawings in order to explain this motion, right? And this motion is pretty complex, right? It's got multiple swirls, right? So in order to be able to hit these points, I know that there are certain areas I have to have this ball, right? Like, it's starting here. I know I'm going to have to take it up to here. I know I'm going to have to take it down to here. I know I'm going to have to take it up to here, down to here, and then to here, right? It's going to hit those points in order to even get close to this. Yes? Did it just start doing this? Okay. Cheez-Its are awesome. I love Cheez-Its. Like, they are the best cheese-based cracker. Going on record with that. Right into the camera. I hope, I would love it if machine learning would now, if I monetized this video, if machine learning would make Cheez-Its the people who are my commercial at the beginning, I would do this every video. Anyway. I mean, living high on that Cheez-It money. So in order to get this ball to go through this path, I'm going to have to draw multiple other versions of it in these different locations, right? These different key locations or key poses, right? So if I were to tell you to do this in 5 drawings, you have to make hard choices, right? And so that's the way to think of this is like, what is the minimum number of drawings? Like if I said 5 drawings, could you get as close as you could to showing this motion with 5 drawings? If you had to limit it to that, where would you put those drawings, right? Maybe for me, I mean, I already got 1 and 2. Maybe I'd do 3, 4, and then 5, right? If I had it to 6, I could do it there, right? So let's just do that. Let's go ahead and extend it to 6. And I'm going to go ahead and put in my 6 drawings that are necessary to get as close to this as possible, right? So again, go to ball A. I'll go ahead and go out to say, let's say right about here. And I'm going to create an empty drawing. Right? And I'll just put my next drawing about there. A little too small. There we go. Go out here to maybe frame 30. Now, let's go a little bit further because it's got to go that whole dip there. Like there, maybe. Add a new drawing. So it's this button right here. Put one down here at the bottom of the dip. Maybe I'll go a little further. I have to go all the way up around here to the top. So I definitely want it up here at the highest point that it gets to. And if you look at this, what I have is starting point, the highest point of this motion, the lowest point of this motion. So I probably want to go to the highest point here. I would also really like the option to put one out here. So if I took it to 7, that would be the furthest right that I'm going to go. So, you know, we're just sort of breaking it down into the most intuitive options. Wait, is that right? Yeah, so right about there. We'll add another keyframe. Put it up here at the highest point. Here, another keyframe, lowest point, and then we already got the ending. Now, just my spacing of this is probably not accurate because of where I put them. But if I turn this off and hit play now, so this is the begin. I'm going to go ahead and click this button here to loop it. So this is the beginning of being able to animate that entire path, right? I can watch this at this speed. It's not particularly clear, like the arcs that this is taking. Right now it kind of feels like it's just disappearing and reappearing in a new place. It's like teleporting around my screen. But if you watch it and kind of pretend, you can imagine the path that it's taking. Right? Imagine if this was just you blinking your eyes repeatedly and just seeing where the ball is each new instance. Well, you could come up with the imagined path for this, right? To actually get the accurate path, we need to start breaking this down into smaller chunks, right? But while we're looking at it here, it's really easy to adjust the timing, right? Like right now, the amount of time it takes it to go from this lowest peak, or this lowest point down there, up to the top is really short, right? So if I wanted to extend that a little longer, I just need more frames in between, right? So right now it's here on this frame, and then less than 20 frames later, it's here on this frame, and then about 20 frames later, it's there, right? And really that just means I need to grab that key and just drag it down here a little bit, make that happen later. And the same here, I can grab that key, drag it, and make it happen later. So just by changing where those keyframes are, I've been able to change the timing, right? Now, It's maybe a little too fast at the end. I pull that back to there. Because I want this to get to the ending relatively soon, right? So I turn my reference back on and play that. You can kind of imagine what it's doing on that path, right? Yes. Looks like you have a duplicate frame. So what you can do is look at right between the bar. Right there. There, back to there. You can do a delete that key, or you can remove it. Actually, right click on that. Actually, let me touch it. However, the new still be all of those frames back. This chunk of frames that we are making the same frame. So we highlight all of those. And then if you go back to there, and I go all out to the next one. First one, yeah. Just the one right after the match. So you would do. Seems like the thing that, so when you move it here, is it moving it here? Well, it seems like what's happening is if you go here, this USB port connects into here. We unplug it, plug it back in, and try that. So to fix this now, right over here, go to display, and choose, actually get out of the file first. So you're, click on, that's what make this one. These little things are kind of buggy, right? Okay. So, obviously this isn't enough keyframe drawings to make this motion clear. So, all I really have to do at this point is start breaking it down into smaller and smaller chunks, right? This is why, this is pose to pose animation, right? I now have 7 poses for this ball. I know where it's going to be at 7 different points. And I can just fill in that part in between. There's another kind of animation called straight ahead animation. And what that means is I draw frame 1, and then I draw frame 2, and I draw frame 3, and then I draw frame 4, until I get to frame 90. That's harder to predict where you're going to end up, right? You can't time it quite as easily. And that's usually used in short stretches of animation where you don't necessarily know what you need the character to do, right? Let's say like a character stumbling and flailing, like you can't really plan a flail very easily, so you would animate that straight ahead. It's also used in stop motion animation, but mistakenly, people think that means that stop motion animators don't plan anything. Most stop motion animators do the entire shot in 2D or in some form of planning before they ever touch the puppet, or before they ever touch the maquette, right? Or armature. So recognize that the pose-to-pose process is the vast majority of animation that is ever done is done in a pose-to-pose process. So I'm just going to start breaking this down into more and more chunks, right? I can hit stop here in between this frame And let's go in here and break it down into one of the sections that needs more fidelity, right? So from here to here, I would really like the pose that tells me it takes it out to the edge here. Same as it goes from here to here, right? I'd like to take it out to this edge. So let's go ahead and put a breakdown in between each of those. There. Again, turn on my onion skinning so I can see the size. Let's do something like that, right? Same out here. Okay. It's a little on the big side. There we go. So, again, if I hide this layer now and hit play. So now it's making a little more sense, right? And start to see the path it's taking. So I'm just going to keep breaking this down more and more. Maybe in between here and here. I want to be able to see that it goes down this path. So about halfway. Break it down again. I want right about there. All right. And then again, when I hit play, you can see how it works. Now at any time here, I can start shifting these keys around to make them happen at a slightly different time. So again, like from the top here down to here, like that happens pretty quick, but maybe that's what I want. Maybe I want it to look like it happens pretty quick. And I want it to look like it eases in at the end here. So, so I can still, leave this timing similar, I think. But at any time, we can start shifting these keyframes around to change the timing however we want it, okay? You have to be careful that you don't drag, like basically what you're doing is you're dragging that pose to another spot on the timeline. And if you drag it to a place before one of the keys, you may overwrite it. So for example, I have this, let's turn off my onion skinning. I have this drawing and I have this drawing. If I were to click this and drag it way back here to here, I may end up like messing up where those drawings, well, I guess I didn't. I kind of took it to the other side of it. But there is ways that you can accidentally like delete that whole drawing just by copying over it. If I drag from here to here, I just overwrote that drawing, right? Or that, it's not that drawing, it's that exposure, that pose, right? Okay. So now that I have sort of the basic path that this animation is taking, right? Now I need to start worrying about the easing. Like how is this thing slowing down and speeding up, okay? So let's just take one little section of that and break it down into more detail, right? So I'm just going to take how this thing stops, right? Like we talked about this yesterday, like if the object is moving a big distance every frame, it's going to seem like it's moving fast. If it's moving a small distance every frame, it's going to seem like it's moving slow, right? If the distance it's traveling gets smaller and smaller, it's going to seem like it's decelerating, like it's slowing down. If it's getting bigger and bigger, it's going to seem like it's speeding up, right? So all of these things are things that we can leverage when we start breaking down other little sections, right? So for example, let's just take this last little bit from these last two keyframes, right? So let me zoom in here and we can just look at the end of this from frame, looks like frame 74 to 90, right? So really all I'm needing to look at is just those keys. Let me shrink down my onion skinning here so we can pay attention a little better. There we go. And if you hold Control and scroll, it will also zoom into your timeline a little bit. And you can sort of pan over here. So from this pose here, right, to this pose here, we're just going to talk about how we get to there, right? So if I were to go halfway between this, right? If I were to start here and go to here, like halfway between that is right here. And I think our first instinct would be to say this drawing should just be another circle halfway between those two drawings, right? Like to think that it would be just like right here. Now, if we do that though, then that means it's going to move there evenly, right? What I want to happen instead is I want it to feel like it gets to this ending or gets most of the way to this ending pose pretty quickly and then sort of slows into that, eases into that, right? It decelerates, right? So instead, halfway between these two poses, this new drawing, I'm going to put it most of the way to this end location. I'll put it probably about right there, right? And so now you'll see what happens when we watch that little section. So it feels like it kind of slows into that ending point, right? And so I can start subdividing that more and more, right? So again, from here to here, that's quite a few frames to go between those two, right? It's looks like there to there. So I'm going to go ahead and cut it about in half, right? And new drawing, and I'm going to make another drawing right here on top of it, almost there, right? And I'm just going to keep doing that, keep sort of subdividing it. That was bad. Zoom in here a little bit. Shrink down my onion skinning a little bit so I'm not seeing all these. So, if I were to watch that little section now, watch how it eases into it at the end. Now that gap in between there, in between the this section from, let's see, from here to here, still needs some definition though. So let's go ahead and pull that back a little bit as well. So in between there and there, I'll go ahead and subdivide that in half about. And again, I want it to be closer here, but that's sort of the wrong spot for that keyframe. Put it right about there. Maybe do like here. And then and then from there, I'm gonna drag that to there. Give me one more breakdown in there. So if we watch that ending now, see how it kind of feels like it eases into that last little bit. Now, something you may notice here, when I was animating this, I was not putting a drawing on every frame, but I was putting a drawing on at least every 2 frames, right? So let me move this back one. There we go. And so you'll see from this last little stretch here, I have a drawing on every 2 frames, okay? This is called animating on 2s. That's not cheating, right? it's okay to stop here. For a lot of motion, this is still readable, right? Which means on some level, what we're really watching is 12 frames a second. But most like medium speed, slow speed motion is okay at 12 frames per second. It's when you have a really fast motion or a motion that has a lot of detail in it that you want to get that down to ones. And so I'm going to go ahead and finish my shot off in twos, and you can as well. So I'm going to go ahead and just spend a little time, a little work time, and just be doing that, right? So let's go ahead and say, let's take like 30 minutes and just animate our ball. Let's see where we can get in that amount of time. Very simple drawings. Let's see what sort of path we end up working out for this. And this is just practice time. I will mention, I wouldn't encourage you to do it a lot because I want you to get in the practice of drawing these frames. But let's say you get to here and you're not 100% happy with like the location of one of these frames. Like it feels to me like, I think it's this frame right here. Got just a little on the big side, that drawing did. You can still select that drawing and scale it and like manipulate it, or even just like change its location a little bit. That's not cheating either. But like just in terms of time saving, try to get it in the drawing. That way you don't have to spend too much time in this editing mode. You can just spend more time in the drawing side of it. Okay. So even though it's going to be a little bit of a boring section of the video, I'm going to go ahead and leave YouTube, or leave the video still recording, and that way you can kind of watch me animate if you want to. Oh, I know I forgot to mention a whole bunch of little stuff. If you hold down the space bar, you can pan around your screen. And if you scroll, you can zoom in and out of your screen.
mine disappeared, and I don't know how to get it.
Fine. Oh, you're not bugging me. That's why I'm here. So, given the timeline, right now it's like here, it's down here, but is that okay? Right? That's weird. These are the new pins too. And that's about that. I'm gonna see if I can get that working. It's like combined thing cable.
I know, it is unfair. Why'd you it is fair.
It's just this
I don't think it's a driver because I know that's computer. There's a new driver, but your sync still works. So.
It seems like there's actually something wrong with this.
It's just display settings.
So it's definitely getting this.
It's a word.
So, no, I mean, we need to return this one before. Um, next class. But maybe the project from the other class. That so. See what we've done is I'll move back on the line for you. Is it working? Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I'm wanting people's opinions on this too, to see how they like them. Few more minutes here to do this. I'll be right back. Because you shouldn't go on the same exposure again, you go to that one, yeah, I like it. Started that one. We'll kind of talk about that. But I can get started, I have like a rough sketch of it. So the portions, and then really what we're just portions in the next two classes, and then whatever you finish with that character design, you can just put it at the top of it. So basically, what is style you want? That's cool. Alright. So I'm not finished with mine. I know you're probably not either just yet. You'll get a rough idea of kind of what I'm getting right now. Because there's certain areas I kind of refined in, and I'm still going to keep working on it. So again, I know it's not. If you're, let me make sure this is still recording. All right. So I know this isn't always exciting, and I know I'm like, yeah, draw a circle, and nobody like, you know, you're wanting to draw like something a little more intricate. The reason I had you do just a circle moving around the screen is because we're going to attach some things to this, okay? So remember, I'm just gonna go ahead and stop this just at any given frame, right? Let's say this one. I don't know, let's go back and find one where it's a little further up, right? This frame here or this frame here, right? Yesterday we were talking about the three main masses on a character, right? We had the pelvis, we had the rib cage, and then we have the head, right? I want you to pick which one this is, right? So let's say this is the head. Right? That means this is the rib cage, and this is the pelvis, right? Well, those are all connected together, right? So I want you to do those other two masses connected to this mass you've already animated, right? So if you choose that that's the head, right, let me undo this so I can show you what I'm talking about. If I chose that this mass is the head, right, and right here it slowly starts moving and toward this, well, how would the rib cage and the pelvis react to that, right? Like maybe in this pose, and I'm going to go ahead and do this on another layer. Right there. So we'll call this the rest. Okay. So this is where the head is here, right? Or maybe the rib cage is here, the pelvis is here. Right? Well, as we go to here, how does that continue to progress, right? So we got from there. We need all of that. Let's shrink this down just to like the frame after it, maybe before it, like that. So if this is the next drawing here, what is the result to those other two masses? So let me kind of connect this just so you can see what I'm talking about. There, new layer, new layer. Is it dragging the second mass behind and the pelvis behind that? All right. And then let's go to F5 here.
So we're just going back through and adding two more balls.
Yep. How is it reacting? Right. So maybe by the time it gets to here, in this very last drawing, it's here. Right? Maybe on the one before it to here, maybe it went past. Just kind of show you quickly. Here. So if we watch this last little stretch now, with my onion skinning off, we'll see that we can start to understand how those other two masses are being affected by that first mass that we animated. Now the reason I'm doing this is because it's very easy to understand, not very easy, but like, you know, you've already proven that you can understand like this ball changes over time, right? The thing about that is a human being is not a ball, right? A human being is not a circle. We're a much more complex, interconnected group of limbs and organs, right? And learning how to make that move in a way that makes sense is really about those three masses, right? So let's say I'm curiously walking towards something. Maybe how that happens is my head goes first and it pulls my chest and hips after it, right? Versus if I'm like walking home like sleepy, maybe my hips are pulling me forward and my head and chest are sort of dragging on behind it. Every motion that we have is based off of those three masses and one of them leading the other. If your character is very confident, let's say Gaston from Beauty and the Beast, His chest leads everything he does, right? That rib cage, it's what goes first everywhere he goes, and his head and pelvis sort of drag along behind that, right? So these three masses are going to be the first thing you animate on any character. So I want you to practice that by having them animate around right now, right? You've animated one, and that was probably a lot of fun to figure out how this is going to move. Now it's going to be a challenge to figure out how that object's movement affects those other two circles, those other two spheres or balls. So that is what one of our assignments is for today. Again, that's not due next class period, that's just due by Monday, but that's one of the things I want you to work on. So is that clear? Anybody have questions on that one? Yes. If you wanted to put the limbs on there, you could. Really, this is more of an exercise on how to make those things feel like they're affecting each other. So you don't have to worry about how the steps are happening. But if you wanted to add some arms and legs dangling around, or if the path that you have yours taking would make sense to be a character like stumbling or jumping, you're welcome to, but you don't have to. So. Okay. So I am, hopefully, any other questions on this ideas? Does this seem fun or does this seem boring? I can't tell. I'm just pinging you here to find out. So I'm going to go ahead and stop this and hit File, Save. Okay. So I'd like to switch gears just for a few minutes and try some other things, because one of the other things that was on our list that we need to do is design our dance character, right? So we go back up to our to-do list here for this week. The connected ball animation, well, we got the 20 sketches. I'd say most of you are probably pretty much finished with those or getting close. The connected ball animation is what we're doing right now, right? And so just walking around, most of you already have one of the three balls moving. You can do this however you want to. You could do the next pass on a new layer where you just connect one of the balls, and then do the next pass on a third layer where you connect the other one. Or you can do one more layer where you connect both of them, or you could do all of them on that same layer, whichever one works for you. Basically, what I'm looking for is 90 to 120 frames of animation. I set mine up for 90. It can be animated on twos, meaning you don't have to do all 90 of those frames. If it's at 90, that means you're only really animating 45 drawings, right? And they're all circles, so it shouldn't be too terribly hard. So this is what I want to focus in on. Let me go ahead and put this on here. On ones or twos. Okay? So this next thing here, this dance character design, I want to read this one because this is what we're going to get into here in a few minutes. But before we get into this, we're not really going to do it in class. I'm going to kind of give it to you as an assignment. Before we get to that point, I want to do a couple more practices so we can kind of get an idea of workflow on how to come up with a character design. So what we're going for, a single image, fully inked and colored, of your dance character. So the character should be someone who does not want to be in a dance club, but has somehow found themselves at one anyway. The design will need at least a front and a side view. If you want to do a 3/4, you can. There's not really a reason for a back view unless you plan on having the character turn around or something. And it is recommended that you do this image in Toon Boom so you can use those illustration resources later in your animation. It's not required if you're still feeling more comfortable in Photoshop to do your sketching and stuff. But if you draw this full illustration in Toon Boom, you can always chop that up and reuse it in parts of like the limited animation later. So I would encourage you to kind of keep practicing in Toon Boom and getting more comfortable in there. I know it's a little clunky in certain elements, but that would be my 2 cents. So You do not have to have this done by next class period. What you should have, though, is you should have decided on which of your thumbnails you're going to use, right? Because that's going to tell you your proportion, and it's going to tell you the size of those three masses. What we're going to do in the next class is we're going to do some limited animation, and we can put that on those three masses. We can put that on these like sketched out versions and then finish up those drawings later. The way I usually do my animation is I animate with a character that looks like, I think I showed it to you the other day, with a character that looks like pretty much like this guy, right? This is what you need to have figured out by next class period, right? Because we're going to start animating this, okay? For our first animation, we're going to sort of break out of this drawing every frame thing. We're going to do a little bit of limited animation. So what we'll do is we'll break up the character into the head, and like we'll pose the character in a single drawing, but then we'll sort of break off the head, we'll break off the foot, and we'll animate those sort of like bobbing or tapping by themselves, right? So doing a little bit of limited animation. But on dance number 2, you're going to be redrawing this character every frame, right? So by that point, you need to know exactly like your character's proportions so you can animate those three masses together. Eventually, you'll need the finished illustration of it, but that's sort of the last pass, right? Why draw a perfectly finished illustration over and over and over again? Because you may get halfway through that and realize your timing is all off and you wasted 40 drawings, right? We can figure that out with this guy. Like we can animate this guy much quicker, or this character much quicker, and figure out if our animation is working before we go through all of the work of illustrating every frame, coloring every frame, all of that. Does that make sense? Okay, so right now let's talk about a little bit about developing your character. So how many of you have an idea already of who you want to not want to be at the dance club? Anybody want to share any of them? Or is it a secret? It's a secret. So there's an interesting element to that, right? Because it starts with a question, like who would be opposed to going to a dance club, right? Why? Like, are they standoffish? Is it against some moral belief? Is like was it Footloose? Like those kids just want to dance, but like but no, you can't. Like, is it? Maybe for some reason like they're worried they're going to bump into their ex there? Do they just not like social situations? Like what is the reason they don't want to be there, right? And when you have that question, you have to start making up a story about that person. That means you're asking yourself questions about their personality, right? Maybe the reason they don't want to be at the dance club is because they work all the time and they're just exhausted. They're like, I don't feel like dancing, right? So they're exhausted because they work all the time. What do they work all the time doing? Maybe they work at Walmart, right? And like they're just really tired of like dealing with people all the time. So they're just maybe they're feeling sarcastic in groups, right? They're like, every time I'm in a group at Walmart and people are being rude and like so whatever. Like you have to start asking these questions and fleshing that out, right? So one of the first things I would recommend you doing is just writing that stuff down. You can do it on a Post-it note. You can do it in Word. You can do it whatever. Just write down a list of interesting qualities about that person. Now, the thing to remember is that your first attempt is not usually, sometimes, but not usually your best, right? Like your first idea is usually most people's first idea, right? Like, and sometimes it's still really good, but that doesn't mean you should stop there, right? So what I would recommend you do is you sit down, you come up with, let's say, an entire like paragraph or 5 or 6 notes about a character, right, who doesn't want to go to this dance club. And once you've got that, be like, all right, that's cool. I'm going to stop there, and now I'm going to come up with another character, completely different character. Maybe this character doesn't want to be there because he's a grizzly bear. And he knows that if somebody's going to shoot him because he's a grizzly bear at a dance club, he shouldn't go to dance clubs, right? Like whatever idea, this character doesn't want to be there because they're the owner of another dance club, right? And they're worried that somebody will see them there, like it's whatever. It's like the KFC guy eating at Chick-fil-A, right? Like whatever issue you want to come up with, and come up with 4 or 5 ideas, because sometimes your third idea is your best idea, right? Now, even if you're really, really excited about that first idea, I would challenge you to do that. The reason for that is because if character design is what you want to do, you recognize that your job is to find the right solution to a problem, right? The art director comes to you and says, hey, we need this character for this dance club. We don't know who they are, come up with some stuff, right? They're not paying you to be brilliant. Like they didn't pay you because you have a special type of brain that is the only brain that could have came up with that. They pay you because, or the reason you have that job is because you are going to exhaustively figure out the best answer, right? So usually when an art director comes to you and asks you for that, what they're looking for is 50 different ideas. And then they'll say, I really like these 5. Let's start working in on those 5, right? And then like you narrow it down to those, it's like, oh, I'm loving this, but can we give it this hat? Can we give this character this hat instead? And then you refine that into a final piece, right? So the skill you need to be good at as a designer, as a concept artist, is coming up with ideas and working through those visually, and then moving on to the next one, not spending like forever on that until it's time to refine that one idea, right? So last class period, that's why we were doing those 5 sketches and then moving on to the next one. I think that that's a good exercise, so I'd like to take a couple more minutes and just crank out a few more of those. And then I would like, after maybe about the third one, we're going to pick one of those and sort of refine that into a little bit of a better drawing. Okay, so this is just some practice stuff for us. This is not something I'm going to be taking up as an assignment, but I think it's going to be good practice for you for the when it comes time to design the character. So let me go ahead and get this up. So you're welcome to do this in this ball scene. Like this is just some doodle pages. You're welcome to do this in Photoshop. You're welcome to do it in a Moo Toon Boom scene. Whatever you'd like. I'm going to go ahead and pull up some more character descriptions. So we already did Alex. We already did Gwendy. So let's move on to Billy George. Loosely based off of a real person.
He really lost his right foot in a bar brawl in Michigan. Where in Michigan?
Loosely. It's actually in Chicago. So, no. Okay, so timer here. What I'd like to do, let's say like those very gestural ideas, like just the form, like a quick blocked out shape of this character. Let's do 5 of them, and I'll go ahead and give you, let's say 5 minutes just to block those out. Okay, ready? And go. Oh, I'm sorry. Let me read this one first. I mean, I know you all can read, but just let me read it out loud anyway. So Billy George, former truck driver before he lost all of the toes on his right foot in a bar brawl in Michigan. He's jolly, despite his lack of toes. He has a southern accent and chews tobacco. He sells used cars in a makeshift small town car lot that he started in his brother's front yard. He has always and will always have a mustache. It's a matter of pride. Okay, here we go. Resume. 5 minutes. I have a fruit cup, but I don't have a spoon. So, just to talk about this a little bit more, don't spend too much time refining and on the drawing. Like I know that we have a lot of details here. He has a mustache, right? That doesn't mean you necessarily have to worry too much about the mustache. You don't have to worry about the eye proportions. Really, what I'd like you to think about most in this, like you should be able to get this all 5 drawings done in under a minute. Because really what you're looking for is those 3 main masses, right? So for Billy George, like let's say you started off, you're like, okay, he's kind of jolly, he's maybe like, he's selling used cars, maybe he's not like super active, so maybe he's a little chubbier, right? And so maybe you do like a head, and then you do a torso that's a little bit bigger, and maybe just a little bit of a bigger, maybe like you're thinking something like this, right? So my challenge to you is like, okay, you have 3 spheres now, some legs, right? Maybe you give them a little like arm here, right? And whatever. If you have to give him a mustache, that's cool. However, like the real thing that where you get to challenge this is from that very start, those 3 circles that we made, right? So like think extremely like I have these 3 circles. It started off with like medium, a little bit bigger, right? That's kind of dull. Like let's exaggerate that a little bit more, right? Let's go ahead and get Billy George's head. Go ahead and make his chest the same, but maybe we make him a really big butt, right? And so then we can get him like a little bit of something like this, right? And so now I have a completely different set of proportions, right? Who says we have to be anywhere near realistic with this? Let's give him a giant head, a little bitty torso, and like a slightly bigger butt, right? Like maybe we're going for something like this, right? Or like maybe you want to really go nuts with this, right? Maybe enormous head, bitty torso, right? Is there like this is your animation. This can be whatever you want it to be, right? And so, like once we have this, then we can refine it even more, right? Maybe I want to go the other way. Maybe Billy George actually he's gotten all these fights and these bars and stuff. Maybe I'm going to go for medium head, kind of a bigger torso, and like maybe he's a little bit more like beefy. Yeah. So maybe he's a little bit more like this. And if it's that, like, does he have little bitty arms, or does he have like these big like sort of hulking arms, right? So like, is this Billy George? I don't have to have any details yet. What I'm doing is I'm getting as many of these little thumbnails out here as I can in order to look at that and sort of blur my eyes and be like, what I have in my head when I first read that description, which of those does it best apply to, right? You're just getting something on paper for you to react to. So to me, maybe I react most to this one, right? But maybe you're really digging this giant head one, while somebody else is like, no, I kind of like that first one we did, right? This is the reason to try it more and more in this like quick gestural way, right? So I'm going to try this next one a little different. Instead of doing 5 minutes on this next video or this next character, I want you to do it like that in 1 minute. So 5 drawings in 1 minute. Tell you what, I'll be nice. 1 minute and 15 seconds. So, Gavin. Gavin is 22 years old. He's a French waiter at a high-class restaurant in Paris. He always wears a well-tailored suit, clean cut. He knows how to leverage his accent to charm ladies, particularly the tourists, and he's absolutely terrified of spiders. Okay? So, 1 minute, 15 seconds. Let's get 5 Gavin thumbnails. And go. Anybody get all 5? Cool. So, again, I know we've already kind of talked about this. I like starting with these 3 spheres or these 3 circles. You don't have to use circles. Like maybe when you heard of Gavin, he's very rigid sounding. It feels very like proper, right? Circles like are these softer shapes. Maybe the first thing you thought of with Gavin is like, oh, you know what? I'd really rather do that with boxes. Right? That's fine. Like we could do Gavin as like, is he boxy chest, smaller boxy chest. I just keep imagining him with his feet together, and then like square head. Right? Maybe that's too big of a chest, but you get the idea there, right? Do you think of like once we get those circles, there's nothing says we can't change those, right? Say we do a circle for his chest, a circle for his hips, a circle for his head, right? But I could also just erase a side of each of these. Like that. And just flatten that out. So we get these very flat shapes, right? I don't know, whatever it is you want to do. Also, again, like the distance those things are apart from each other, right? Maybe like you want him to feel kind of stuffy, so his head is up here. Look at this here. His head is up here, his chest is up here, but his torso is way down, but his pelvis is way down there, right? So you got this big like connecting piece to make him feel a little bit taller and lankier. So this is a quick way of sort of cranking out ideas visually and saying, does that feel like Gavin to me, right? Also, like you can think of the character as an overall shape, right? Like that's fine too, and then figure out how those masses can fit into that overall shape, right? Like let's say if we think of Gavin as one long elongated cylinder or box, maybe what I'm going to do is just draw this and see how Gavin fits into this like that, right? To get my idea of what he's doing, right? And then after that, I can always erase that. So, so all of these are fine. Like you have to kind of figure out what you're going for there in this just quick glance impression, right? If you flash this character at somebody for less than a second, what are the takeaways from that, right? That's what you're designing for on that first level. Okay. So we're going to do one more. This one's always kind of fun. So we're going to go ahead and do one more. And then after that, we're going to take him and sort of elaborate on him a little bit just as an exercise. So again, I'm going to give you 1 minute to do 5. Let's go give you 2 minutes to do 5 thumbnails, right? And then we're going to take one of those thumbnails, and for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes, I'm teaching a class. So,
Why does it ring like a phone and then?
I can't figure out how to make it stop doing that. Next one, 2 minutes, and nope, different guy. So let me get it set on here. Here we go, Brantley. Brantley is 55 years old. He's a British butler. He wishes he were Alfred Pennyworth, but he is not. He hates his job and the people he works for. He refuses to have his suit resized, even though it doesn't fit correctly. He's not physically fit and has bad posture. He's constantly scowling. Okay? So about 2 minutes, let's get 5. If you want to do more than 5 thumbnails, that's cool. Let's just sort of get a rough idea of what you think that silhouette looks like. So go. Anybody get a Brantley they like? No? All right. So what I'd like you to do, I'll let you choose from any of the ones we've done so far. Okay, Brantley. Who else did we do? Billy George. We did Gavin. Did we do another one? Yeah, I think that's all of them. You can also choose from the ones you did yesterday if you want to do Alex and Gwendy. I'd like you to just take 10 minutes, okay, and take one of those thumbnails, right, enlarge it, and start refining that illustration. So let me show you what I'm kind of talking about here. In Toon Boom, let's say, I'm going to go back to, I was pretty happy with this one right here for Billy George, right? So I'm just going to highlight and select all of that, right? And say Control C, turn off my layer, create a new drawing layer, hit Add, Control V. Okay. So now he's on here all by himself, and I can make him as big as I want. Okay. So once I have that, I can add a new layer on top of this, and I can start drawing a more detailed version of this character, right? So I got my brush here, maybe make my maximum size a little smaller, and I can start refining out Billy George, right? So you can do this as many times as you want to. You don't have to just use 2 layers. I can do a slightly more defined version of him here, and then take that and do even a more refined version after that. So let's say I want to move this torso all together into one kind of bean shape. I want his legs to be. Yes, I'm in a freaking class. I need to just turn off my ringer now. So do something like this. So I'm just kind of figuring out these shapes a little more. I think the shoes need to be a little longer. This giant head, I love it. I'm going to put a hat on it. Cap. I'm going to go and put the arm over here. And then this is the arm he'll be gesturing around with. And I can kind of roughly start coming up with some facial features if I wanted to. Not necessarily have to yet, but maybe I want to know some big eyes. So this is something I can refine even more. I could do like 5 thumbnails of the facial proportions too. Let's say, guys, kind of a smaller nose, and giant grin. So now in terms of hair, something like this, just a little bit of a mullet going on. He needs that mustache. Now, okay, so this could be my first take on him, right? Then from there, I can turn off that layer and use this sketch to refine him even more, right? So just one layer at a time, I'm going to figure out what Billy George really looks like. So we can just keep refining this over and over and over again until we start getting the character design that we're really wanting, right? So this is the way I work. One of your last versions of this drawing, though, I want you to kind of think about, like, when you're getting your last pass on doing your lines and your color and all of that, start thinking about the amount of detail you're putting into something, right? So let's say you're drawing that mustache for Billy George, right? And you're doing all of this detailed hair, texture stuff in here on this mustache underneath his nose, and his nose has these extra lines and everything. You have to redraw those lines every time you draw this character, right? So something to think about is how do you simplify these shapes so you can draw them a little more easily every time, right? Maybe Billy George's mustache is really just that, right? Do you carve a little chunk out of it? Whatever it is you can do so you can redraw this character repeatedly 24 times for a second of animation, 12 to 24 times for a second of animation, right? So I just want you to be thinking about that on your last version of this illustration. So just for fun, just go through that process and sort of tinker with this. This is not something I'm going to be taking up, but just because most of you probably are not ready to start doing that with your main character, right? Okay, so you can spend the rest of class doing that. You can also, let's go back and look here really quick. If you have an idea for your dance character design, go ahead and start writing up your ideas and start doing your thumbnails for that too. What you're going to be animating next class period, again, is that very simplified version of your character, right? You're going to be animating this guy, right? We'll be drawing poses, in this style, right? So you're going to need to know his proportions, or her proportions, right? But you don't really need to know all the details yet. It doesn't have to be fully designed. These are the masses that we're going to be animating, and then we can sort of fill in the details on top of that as we go. So does it make sense? Okay. I'm going to shut up and let you work for a little while because I'm sure you'd appreciate some work time. This is your time, so you use it however you want to. And if the way you want is to just take a break now and go outside and get a drink, if you're I have a class coming up, I need to go grab some lunch or dinner or whatever, I understand. This is completely your time to use how you want, but I'll be here until the end of class or until everybody's gone. and so if you have any questions along the way, I can help you with those. So. All right, cool. Rest of the class is yours. Enjoy. I'm going to go ahead and stop this video. Do I?
You want to see my waiter?
I do. Let me kill this. Let me go ahead and stop this video here real quick, and that way I can be uploading it. So, stop recording. Bye.